We're back on Inside Politics today with Vanderbilt professor Dr. Thomas Schwartz, a distinguished professor of both political science and history. Dr. Schwartz, President Biden's done an awful lot of things on executive orders, including getting the country back into the Paris Climate Accord. But in order to meet those goals, he's going to have to probably get some legislation passed through Congress. Is he going to run into that 60-vote problem in the Senate?
Yes, I think on issues related to the Paris Climate Accord, the Republicans are more skeptical. It will really depend on how the issue is particularly framed, what the costs are, how is it being pursued. The Green New Deal is fairly toxic to most Republicans, and it's a campaign slogan that they're going to be fighting on. So I think he's got to, if he does anything connected to the Paris Climate Accord, it would probably have to be relatively modest in order to get the 60 votes, unless they get rid of the filibuster, which is, of course, a larger question.
President Trump agreed to remove the remaining U.S. troops in Afghanistan by May the 1st. That's not too long away. Yet the negotiations going on between the government in Afghanistan and the Taliban are not going well. Is President Biden going to continue and pull out the troops by May 1st, or is he going to try to do something else?
I think what seems to be happening with President Biden is that he's decided to try and bring in Russia and China into the negotiations, figuring that even though Russia and China may not want the United States to prevail in Afghanistan, they may not want it to fail miserably either, that neither want to see necessarily the restoration of the Taliban. And I think he's trying to create a situation also of involving Turkey as well, another Muslim country, in a way expanding the problem. This is the argument that David Ignatius put forward in the Washington Post recently, that the Biden administration is essentially trying to expand the problem, trying to draw in other partners. And this fits with the overall Biden foreign policy, that going it alone is not very successful for the United States. So if it can draw in other countries that might be willing to supervise some sort of power sharing agreement between the Afghan government and the Taliban, that might provide an ability then for the United States to withdraw. But it is a gamble too, and otherwise I don't think that Biden is necessarily going to want to withdraw on the May 1st timetable if there is a possibility of getting some type of an agreement. President
Biden's already had to use force in the Middle East to protect American interests over there, and they may have to have another strike after some more things have happened over there. There have been some bipartisan concerns raised about him doing that, particularly under the War Powers Act. Since this also involves his own party, is he going to have a problem there? Are we actually going to see Congress do something different to change the War Powers Act?
Well, there are a number of issues here that both the War Powers Act, but also the authorization for the use of force after 9/11. And there is the argument that the president should actually, since the situation has changed so much since 9/11, that authorization for the use of force should be repealed. I think this is one of those areas where the president has a record in the Senate of wanting to have Congress assert its powers more. But I suspect that as things develop, he is not going to want to see himself limited. That even though members of his party and some senators like Tim Kaine, who was Hillary Clinton's running mate, want to see some greater limits or restoring the War Powers Resolution Act as a serious limit on presidential powers, that President Biden's not going to want to see that happen, because presidents like to be able to have flexibility in the use of force to defend American interests. And I think that is something we've seen as a constant really since World War II.
In terms of Iran, we've got this you first, no you first, to try to get the nuclear agreement back in place.
Yeah.
What's he going to do to break that deadlock and get that back in place if that can be done?
I suspect here that he may be waiting on the results of the Iranian elections, which will take place in the spring. And in that sense, it may be one of these situations where if the Iranian elections move in any fashion toward a more moderate or toward keeping a more moderate government, that the United States then will make a concession. The problem is that the Iranian elections might move in a more hardline manner and make it harder afterwards. But I suspect the timing may be related to those elections. On the other hand, it is possible that President Biden might make a unilateral gesture concession in order to try and lure the Iranians back to the negotiating table.
This last topic, we're just about run out of time. Too many topics to talk about. Is sort of both a domestic and a foreign policy issue, and that is it appears President Biden already has a crisis on the southern border. It looks like most people have interpreted his election meaning the borders are wide open. The president says they're not, but they still keep coming in looking for asylum. What's he going to do to get that under control?
That's a good question, because in effect the election has been seen as a signal that the border is open and that unaccompanied youth who are oftentimes transported by networks in Mexico, some of these coyotes and others who basically make this a promise to people to get them into the United States. And this is going to be an issue for him. He doesn't want to repeat the Trump mistakes or perceived mistakes of putting children in cages and all of that. So at some point, they're going to probably have to issue some sort of declaration and try to maintain the border. But I think this is one of those crises that was almost inevitable given the rhetoric from the campaign.
Dr. Schwartz, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you always coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me on.
And thank you for being with us on Inside Politics. Hope you'll be back here again for a future show. If you can't get enough politics in the meantime, go to the NewsChannel 5 website. You'll find my Capitol View commentary there. There's a new commentary posted every Friday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back here next time. Goodbye.